should be coming online now. Slight delay, but we'll get started. So for people tuning in, I'm just getting a few things set up, and then we'll get ready to go. So this is going to be another Guerrilla scripting stream. Yesterday we covered some of the easier stuff. Hello to the chat. We've already got one viewer in saying hello, so welcome and good evening. Just getting ready to begin. Hopefully I can be heard all right. So let's get started. So hello everybody. I'm Frentz. Thank you. It's good to know that you can hear me all right. So hello everybody. I'm Frentz. I'm the lead technician from the School of Education at the University of Sheffield. I am also a psychology academic / researcher, basically. So I occupy and wear a number of hats. So yesterday I did my first kind of stream, which was on kind of really basic stuff about guerrilla scripting, and we tried to kind of muddle our way through what the things we try if we were kind of new for a particular request. Now that was 1 out of 17 requests, so I think we'll just motor on, and I'm going to use some of my more kind of advanced knowledge for some of these. So let's have a look at what we've got currently remaining. So we have the only one that's completed is the 2 answers per trial that we did yesterday. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick a different one now. One of the ones I was posting about in the Guerrilla Facebook group earlier, which if you haven't joined, by the way, you definitely should join. So again, today we're doing Guerrilla kind of advanced scripting. So welcome everybody. My name's Frentz, for people that don't know me or haven't met me yet. I am from the University of Sheffield, as I mentioned. So now we're looking at some other advanced kind of scripting requests, and I'll try one that I was working on earlier today. So we'll start there, which is this visual degrees presentation issue. So I put all the Guerrilla kind of scripting requests that were unanswered from all the way from start of November into basically this kind of software development platform. Clubhouse is brilliant for working on features, working on requests, all that kind of stuff. You can make epics, and epics are just like collections of stories, and stories are kind of things that end users might request. So that works quite well for my needs of identifying what people want to do. So this earlier example, just to set the stage for everybody, is someone asking about a visual attention task, and they want to fix the location of image zones in visual degrees relative to a central fixation point. They're trying to use the embedded data from the screen calibration zone, and they've provided some code, which is good because if you provide code, it's something for me to work off. But even if you don't, I'm going to be able to kind of work from scratch, which is what we're going to do. So how do we approach something like this? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to go check out the zone and check out what the zone does. So if I'm going to go to Guerrilla, I'm just going to go to my projects, and I'm going to go to my open materials kind of projects, because that's where I'll be doing this. Any requests I do usually go to our open materials page. So let's just set this up and let's look at, so we'll do visual degrees request. So first thing we're going to need is we're going to need a display, of course. We're going to need somewhere to actually display everything that we're doing. First step is we need to get our screen calibration zone in. So I'm going to make an empty screen, and I'm going to make a zone, and we're going to add the screen calibration zone in. Let's make it kind of a random size. Doesn't really matter what size it is for the purposes of this, because I'm just going to pick a random calibration zone. So I'm just going to go to advanced. There we go, screen calibration. And we're just going to press preview to create the spreadsheet. We're just going to have a look and see how the screen calibration zone works. So this is the zone, and you match a credit card to it, There's a bit of CSS breakage here. So this, I'm assuming they're going to update this when this is out of beta, basically. But you try and size this up to get a credit card that's the same size on your screen. Now let's have a little look in the background and see what it does, because we'll use our old friend, the DevTools in Chrome, so we can have a little look and see what's going on here. So whenever you actually submit the screen calibration zone, they've got a log function at the moment. So for those that didn't see yesterday's stream, so when you use the console in DevTools, you can use it as like a bit of a debugging space. Well, the screen calibration zone actually, because they're still in beta, has a console log that will log 3 values for us. One is degrees per pixel, one is pixel per centimeter, and one is pixel per degree. So the last one's the one that we're most interested in. But if I just press submit now, you'll see that it's come up with I didn't tell it to preserve the log, so it'll wipe it really quickly. I'll do it again. I'm just going to tell it to preserve the log so it saves it between kind of page loads. So I press it again. It's given us these 3 values here in purple, which is kind of scrolled past really quickly. So that first value is degrees per pixel. That one is pixels per centimeter, and that is pixels per degree. About 32 pixels on my monitor per degree. So the request for this kind of layout was to kind of generate something that looks a little bit like this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be doing positions kind of 1 and 4 first, because they'll be the easiest. Then we'll look at the side positions. The distractors, I'm assuming, will be placed by someone. I don't know if they need to be placed kind of by us for the visual degrees, but we'll focus on the kind of circular layout first for us. So if we have a look at the code, code itself is includes some stuff about background color and text like that. So that I don't need to do. This about the image zone name and stuff, this is, I'm going to show this in a second. So about how to name zones. It's never good to use the same kind of name for like a spreadsheet input as it is for like a zone name, which I'll show you why in a second. And then this is how we retrieve the Gorilla's embedded data for pixels per degree. So we're going to try and make something like this, but I'm just going to ignore the text and the kind of background colors, because that's something that the researchers already sorted and something that they clearly kind of don't need me for. The refresh layout here and everything else like that, I'm just going to do slightly differently. So where would we get started with this? Well, we've got our research kind of first page here, which is, setting up the screen calibration zone. That's great. The screen calibration zone is going to give us those degrees per pixel. So that's literally what we want. The degrees per pixel or pixels per degrees, doesn't matter. We can work off either. How do we actually make use of that though? Well, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to add another kind of blank page in. This is, the researcher can do this somewhere else. In my case, I'm just going to add in a place just to have some instructions. And the instructions page, I'm basically going to use in the background to do calculations. So why I'm going to do that is because I want to set some CSS up before we move on to the actual next page, basically. And I'll tell you why, because that's to do with the way CSS loads. And I'll explain, how kind of inheritance and kind of race conditions and things like that work, where something might come up before you try and apply something to it, and why that might be important. So remember, this is slightly more advanced than yesterday's stream. So yesterday was kind of getting started with everything, but feel free to pop questions into chat or anything if you want to know as we're going along. So I'm kind of just diving into requests kind of immediately. So we're going to set up a screen for doing calculations in the background. It's going to run some instructions for us. The participant doesn't need to know what it is that we're doing. And I'm going to set up a page where we're going to show our images. So I'm going to put in an image zone. So let's add a zone. Let's call this image zone 1. Now, I want image zone 1 to load from the spreadsheet. So those of you who know Gorilla know we can swap the source to a spreadsheet. So we can call this picture 1, for example. Now you'll notice that I called by zone something different than the mapping. This is good so you don't get confused later. So we refer to this as image zone 1, and we're referring to this as kind of row dot picture 1. So we're not going to get confused. So this will be the first thing that we're going to try and place. Now, when you add a new zone, Gorilla kind of puts it into the middle of the zone layout editor for you, which is great because that means I don't have to move it around. This is going to be central anyway, and then we can move it. There's a couple of ways that we can approach this request. So to generate a layout that looks like this, we can put all of these image zones into place, and then we can try and do a calculation to the center of the viewport and then adjust the CSS based on that. So that's one way to do it. Another way is to create clones of this one, change the class and change the data attributes, and then kind of move it around, which I find easier because in this case, they're not looking for any kind of responses. They're just looking for a layout. So for me, it'd be easier to take one and clone it 6 times to kind of create this layout. That's what we're going to try first. Remember, when you're coding, stuff doesn't go right. I actually have, so for programmers, this will be of no surprise. I have a little duck here. So programmers regularly have these little plastic ducks sat on their desk. The reason for that is we call these the debugging ducks. And basically, if your code breaks, the point is you're supposed to try and explain it to your duck and try and break it down in a way that the most kind of simplistic way that the duck could understand. And when you read your code out, that's when you find the errors in it. Mine's dressed like Sherlock Holmes. I thought that was just adorable, basically. But he sits on the desk while I'm doing this because I will make mistakes. During yesterday's stream, I used uppercase for console.log and couldn't figure out why it didn't work. So, happens to all of us when you're typing quickly. So we've got 3 screens. So we've got the screen calibration. At the end of this screen, Gorilla submits a bunch of data, saves it to the embedded data, which we can then call in screen 2, which is great because then we can do some stuff with the CSS before screen 3. That's kind of where we're starting. So how do we do kind of some scripting for this? Well, we can link in using hooks. So those that don't know where to find information on hooks or have never used them before, hooks are incredibly useful. There's actually more hooks than are available, a couple more hooks than there are available on the Gorilla support site. But hooks are actually really useful because they tell you where to kind of hook into, and they happen at certain points. So basically, like when an event is run, like the screen loads or the screen finishes, a hook is called, and you can kind of paste your own functions and your own code into that so that you can kind of take advantage of that event being fired. So you have like these logical parts where you can kind of hook into. The thing we're going to kind of look at now for this particular example is the on-screen start. So for those that don't know, on-screen start is run when the screen is loaded and ready to start. Now this screen is loaded is important because this hook is firing kind of after the screen has been loaded and it's ready to start. So, as things are kind of still being created and put onto the page, you've got to keep that in mind because, if you try and call something that you haven't yet made or created or affected or something, it's not going to work. So you have to do things kind of sequentially. So how does a hook work? Well, I was going through this yesterday. It's just a really quick kind of recap. I'm just going to copy and paste this from here for this exemplar. So we're just going to stick this in. So a hook basically works, obviously, when an event is fired. So you've got like your on-screen start. So when the page is loaded and ready to go, that's good. But it has a bunch of parameters that are passed to it. So a bunch of parameters that we can then access as objects or, kind of as properties of certain objects. So like it gets past the spreadsheet, it gets past the row index, the screen index, it gets past the rows, the container, which is useful for us because then we can refer to that inside the hook. So this example hook, I'm just going to move my console tab down a bit and just refresh the page just so it makes the screen editor a bit larger, sorry. So this particular one has a couple of if statements here. Now we don't need these particular if statements. We're going to use this one, and yeah, we'll use this one as well. So we'll take out what's inside the if statements because we don't need those. So if statements are conditionals. So for those that have never done kind of scripting before in like an object-oriented kind of language, a conditional is basically like a logical check. So in this case, when the screen starts, the first thing we're going to check is if we're on row display task. Now this will never fire at the moment because mine is called task with an uppercase T, this is lowercase task, so I need to change that. Now, I said this yesterday, but just to recap quickly, why do we use double equals in an if statement? Well, the reason we use double equals in an if statement is because we're checking a value and not setting a value. If you're setting a value, for example, let's say we had var value 1, we would do that, and then we might set, that to be like a string. That uses a single equals sign. If we did that here, we'd be setting it rather than checking it. There is also kind of another version of this where they have 3 equal signs, which is the always equal to. And you do get kind of logical operators as well. So inside the if statements, for example, you can use, like, if you want to do more than one criterion, you could do, for example, like and like that with 2 ampersands, where you might be able to do, so on and so forth. Or if you wanted to do or, like a kind of an or operator when you're searching a database, for example, you might be able to do that. Now, all we need is we just need to make sure that we're on row.displayTask. So this row is basically just an object with kind of a property of display, which is taken from the spreadsheet. So, we've got this first row that we're going to be on. We've got this display, which is put in as a property. And then we've got that we can kind of recall from it, which is great because we can check if we're in there. Now, screen index of 0 is actually this first screen. So if you don't know anything about JavaScript, first thing to learn is it's a 0 index language. So basically it starts counting from 0. So arrays start counting from 0. Anything that you're going to be doing is going to be starting from 0. So if we're iterating over all the screens, if we're running through all of them, this is screen 0, screen index of 0, this is screen index of 1, this is screen index of 2. So on this first one, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to, well, actually, we don't need to do anything on the first screen because that's just setting the embed. We need to focus on the second screen. So we're going to change this to screen index of 1. And what we want to do is we want to recall the pixels per degrees. Now, the pixels per degrees very kindly given to me. The key was given to me by William earlier today on the Facebook page, but the key to retrieve them from embedded data is pixels per degree. So pixels per degree is going to give us the pixels per each individual visual degree. So that's where we're going to start from. Now, when you do a retrieve statement like this from the Gorilla API, you need to put in a value of what happens if it can't retrieve anything. Now, usually people just put null. That's generally the best. And then there's a third optional value, which we're just going to set to true here. That's to just let it be used elsewhere. So I'm just going to put in some comments just so we remember where we are. So whenever you're writing code, it's good to put in comments so you know what you're doing. So pixels per degree, retrieval from screen calibration embedded zone. Because I'm giving this code to someone else, it's nice to obviously be able to tell them what I'm doing. So the first thing we're going to want to do is do a calculation for being how many visual degrees away that we want to be for our first image. So from the code that we saw earlier, the calculation is 2.1 visual degrees away from the center of the screen. So we're going to do that here as well. So the first calculation that we're going to do for the first image position. And how do we do this? Well, let's just make a new variable. Now, for those that didn't watch the stream yesterday, I haven't been able to see it yet. Scope is a really important thing to remember when you're scripting. So scope is like, where can I access variables and where can I access, at what level can I access things? So at the moment, inside this on-screen start hook, we can access this first position within kind of any anything that's kind of nested under here, that's nested within this kind of if function, this conditional. But if I was going to use it outside here, or even try and use it outside here, it wouldn't be able to find it because it's only existing inside this conditional, and then it disappears basically when this is done. So if I wanted to do something, for example, like to refer to a particular display or something, so if I wanted to do like target display or something like that, I'd have to put it out here, and then that could be used in all of your hooks and all of your functions basically. But in this case, I don't really need it for longer than this, so this will be fine for us. I'm just making you aware of scope. So what do we need to do? Well, the first calculation we're going to need to do is a minus calculation, because if we're using top, for example, like the person who was doing this code is, then we're going to need to do a minus calculation, because if you do minus the top, it's going to push it up. If you do plus the top, it's going to push it down, basically. That's just the simple CSS kind of answer for that. So this will be our first calculation. Now, we can't set CSS with just numbers, because when you set a CSS value, you usually have to set the units like pixels, rem, em, whatever you're using. So in this case, we're going to be using pixels. Obviously, we're using pixels per degree, so it'd be a bit, it'd be hard to convert to anything else, basically, if without any kind of difficulty on the fly for things like em for any kind of responsive unit. So it'd be better to use pixels. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to turn this value into a string. So if you've never come across kind of any kind of advanced scripting or anything like that, you probably don't know too much about data types. They generally explained very early on in most kind of scripting courses, but basically data types are, so every time you make a variable, it has to have like a certain type that the data is, so that the language can understand, and compilers and anything that requires the understanding of that variable in its context, you need to know what it is. So a string variable is basically just a bunch of characters. At the moment, this calculation will return a number to us, and I say number because a number, for example, is like this in JavaScript. So it's basically like a float from other kind of languages. If I said it's an integer, that would just obviously be one whole value like that. And if I said it was a string, it would be like that, because that's a string value. It's basically just a character. Now, when we're setting CSS, we need it to be string, so we're going to need to convert this. JavaScript actually comes with a very handy function to convert, so we're just going to use it. You can convert a number to a string by using something, and no prizes for guessing what it is, but it's toString. So the good thing about JavaScript is that a lot of things are named in very kind of plain English, but also if you don't know what you're looking for example, I could type in JavaScript convert number to string, and it'll give me a bunch of options. The W3 schools one is a really good one because you can see it. So this is really good because you can test out and you can see where it works. You can see the kind of parameters, what it returns, and it's been in since like the earliest JavaScript, basically, since Emacs 1. So yeah, it's ECMA. I always call it Emacs. ECMA. Yes, it's been in for a long time, but this number here is now a string value, not a number value for us, basically. So what do we want to do with this to put it into some CSS? Well, you could just, so jQuery, which is loaded, so jQuery is a library that's loaded with Gorilla. So Gorilla has a couple of background libraries that are loaded up with it to give you kind of a bit more functionality to make things a little bit easier. So jQuery is one of those libraries that you can use and you can kind of inject and call functions from. So jQuery, for example, we could refer to something, and I mentioned this yesterday because we can call that container variable, and then we can call the class, for example, imagezone1 like that, and then we could do .css. Now, the problem with this is for the first image zone that's created, so because we're in this particular instance, we're going to be cloning our image zones. For this particular instance that's created, we won't be able to actually affect the CSS, like it won't be loaded for us in a way for it to be able to affect it because of the time that it takes to load everything in. We could delay this call a little bit and then do it a bit later. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is just to add something in to the main kind of CSS that Gorilla has in the background. So how do we do that? Well, you can add a bit of text into Gorilla's kind of main CSS fairly easily. And I've written an example just on the side in Notepad just to copy over. But when you add something into the header, so I'm just going to show you what I'm doing and then I'll explain the code basically. So in the head, there's a bunch of properties and a bunch of things that are loaded up. But one of the things that's loaded in is obviously the kind of CSS master sheet. Now we can add our own little style addition to it. And the way we do that is by saying, we give it a bit of text that we can add into the header. I've just given it a random ID called first image updater. But the reason I'm doing this is because I want to affect the CSS like before or as it loads, basically, for that first image, before I start kind of coding everything. So this will load everything and set everything up, and then load the CSS in. So this is kind of one way to do it for affecting the next page. If you do it this way, you're then going to have to remove this kind of CSS. So I'm just gonna show you why this will not work out very easily and how we can fix it, because debugging is like a really important skill. So understanding why things are happening is a really important skill. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this. And the reason I'm copying this is because I now want to work on the second screen for us, or the third screen, but the second screen that we're interested in. And what I want to do is just remove this because you know what, we'll keep the pixels per degree in, so we can use it to calculate the layout of the others. So just to remind you, yeah, this is the layout we're going for. We're going to start with this one, then do that one. So just showing you why that CSS might be an issue. So so on the second screen that we're interested in, which is here, the zone that we're interested in is called image zone 1. Now, when you run a Gorilla experiment, let me just go to the next page. The zone itself is in this kind of folder, kind of container, and then it has a bunch of classes, but one of the classes is the name of the zone that you gave it. So that's what we're going to be using to refer to it. So image zone 1 is how we're going to be calling it. I'm just going to load up some stimuli. So let's load up some pictures so we have something to use. Let's do Gorilla sample pictures. These are just 5 sample pictures that I use quite a lot. They'll load up. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to get that first one. We're going to try and move it and place it so that it's slightly higher, basically, so 2.1 visual degrees higher, based on our distance calculation from the screen calibration zone. So our pictures are loaded in. We've not assigned anything yet, so let's just assign picture 1 to it. Let's just set that up now. So now when it loads up, it should show us picture 1, and then we can work on moving it. So yep, there's picture 1. And actually, so in the DevTools, you can actually try out different kind of CSS things. So say, for example, I wanted to move this by like 50 pixels. I could try that, for example. Now you'll notice that the picture zones have a zone that holds everything in place, and then there's a actual picture kind of child item that you can then affect as well. You could do the movement on either of them, but it's easier to do it. So it's easier to change the CSS values of the picture than it is for the zone, because the zone is like absolutely positioned, and then you're gonna have to work around the kind of positioning. So one of the ways that Gorilla makes this responsive for people on like smaller screens, like mobile and all that kind of stuff, for example, is the outer kind of thing that holds everything. So the bigger container is like relatively positioned, but everything inside is absolutely positioned based on where you put it in the layout editor. So it's easier just to kind of affect this than it is this. So we're going to use that for now. So how do we make it go up, basically? So how do we lift it from its current position to make it kind of go up? Well, let me just close my DevTools for a second, and I'm going to refresh the page just to get the script editor back to a good size. So what do we want to do is we first want to find it. So I want to find that kind of first main zone. So let's just look for it. And we're going to use a bit of jQuery. So I'm going to look for this main zone, and I'm going to call jQuery to use it's jQuery, but I call it jQuery. It's just easier. In case anyone's annoyed by my pronunciation, it's jQuery, not jQuery, but it's just easier to pronounce. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this container here. So the container is like the thing that we're looking at currently. So you don't want to call every instance of the class, because if you have several trials, which most experimenters will do, you might call several, 100 or however many Gorilla has loaded up for you, and you might call a lot of instances of your class, and you'll be affecting them. You want to kind of do this as it's happening, just so that you can do different things if you want for different classes, and to make sure that you're not accidentally affecting things that you don't want to be affecting. So I'm finding it by calling the class, and the way I call the class is I just use a period, so a full stop, and then I call the class name. You'll also notice I left a space. So the reason I left a space is you can't actually, if you do it like that, you won't be able to find it because it's not like the first in the selector. So it's important to have that so you can find the class. So this way it's going to look for the container, and then it's going to add this to the container. So it's going to try and find the container and then this class inside the container. So that's good. So now we're going to look at why that kind of first position calculation may not work with CSS in the way that we think it does, and how to fix it. So I'm just going to quickly show you why that might not work. So if we do the calculation again, you might think, oh, it's going to be really, really easy because we can just do main zone, we'll do CSS, and we'll do top, and then we'll do first pos, and then we'll do pixels. So what this is in essence saying is, again, we're calling this object that we've got here the main, so the variable that we've created, the main zone kind of reference, which references our object. And then we're calling .css. This is just a function in jQuery, so we can call it to affect particular objects, kind of CSS properties. There are other things that you can do, like you can call main zone dot attributes. You can do like dot attributes. You can do like dot props. You can do like dot children. You can do dot parent, and all that kind of stuff. We'll be looking at some of that a bit later, but what we want to look at now is this kind of top value. So this first position here should give us a negative value, and our screen should shift up, right? Well, I'm just going to make sure, we're going to do a console log statement just to make sure we are getting a negative value. And we're going to start this, and I'll show you what happens to the image. I'm going to pick a ludicrous size for the bank card. I'm going to pull up my console so we can see what's going on. So you see this is still roughly central, and if we check, it hasn't actually moved off, so it hasn't moved at all, despite the fact that we have a negative value that we're expecting. So why hasn't it gone anywhere? Well, when it creates, so when it's loading in and when it's creating everything, if you try and like change a property before it's kind of finished loading in, the property might be overwritten, either by what you're trying to do or by as it's loading in, which is why one way I said what we could do is obviously put something into the CSS so that it's there when it loads up. So we could do that. So that's one way to kind of do it. Another way is to offset something by kind of like a couple of frames, or just to wait a few seconds. So in JavaScript, there's a set timeout, set interval kind of method as well. So you could do this as well. So you could set a timeout function, and then you could do it inside there. So just to show you how that would work. So there's a set timeout function. Just going to spread it out a little bit to make it a bit easier to read for everybody. So inside the set timeout function, I'm going to remove this hello. Just going to put this in. Just going to cut this, put that in. Just, yeah. We have an error on one of our lines. just checking because I missed the full stop there and there to get the actual calculation. So that would be good. So that's trying to call toString. So when you do the toString method, obviously because you're calling a method on it, that was the error that was coming up basically. So if I start this now, we've got our set timeout with the images. So if we do this, timeout's kind of 3 seconds, and there you go. There's the move. So you can see that time the image has kind of moved off. Now you can do this kind of by a single frame, for example. So you could do something that's like, I don't know, 60 milliseconds. You could try to see if that shifts. If we check this now, let me just reload the page. There you go. Yeah, so that's worked. So obviously the reason I reloaded the page though is because when you resize this, it goes back to and removes all the CSS that we did. So obviously when I did the console, it lost it. So I just reloaded it to get that back there basically. So there's our difference for the top. So that's kind of the first one done. So let me just remove the console. So now, because we're offset by a single frame for our call, the image is actually ready and loaded in for us to actually be able to affect the CSS. If I didn't have this in this kind of set timeout or next frame or some kind of like other function, basically, it might not be ready by the time that this is called. At that point, we can't actually affect it. So that's like the first image done. But how do we get from one image to this kind of layout? Well, like I said, you could do this layout all individually and then do the calculations to the center of the viewport and then do your distances. But I want to make life easier for myself, so I just want to clone this particular zone, basically. So how are we going to be able to clone a zone like this? Well, I'm just going to remove our console.log. We want to clone it before, so cloning the zone. We want to clone it before we move it, because otherwise you'll copy the move, obviously. So what we want to do is what we want to do is we're going to call the correct level of inheritance, basically, to be able to clone it. So if we just call like a straight, so again, this is a jQuery kind of method that you can use. So if we just call a straight clone, that won't work because it's not kind of where we need it to be. So actually, what we want to do is we want to call the parent of it, because that's the gorilla zone, the container, and then we want to clone that. So jQuery for people that don't know, everything kind of happens right to left. So it finds this first, then it finds this, then it does this, and all that kind of stuff. So in this case, we're going to look for the parent. And the reason we're going to look for the parent is I'll show you, because this will kind of put it into context. So if I go to here, I'm just going to open up the HTML here. So this is obviously the class that we're pulling. This is what we're targeting. Then you've got the parent here, and then you've got the grandparent here. So inheritance works kind of like so. When you're talking about parents and children and siblings and everything like that, as you go up like a nested level in HTML. So if we go from our class to like this, for example, you get like a level up. So you get a parent, then you get another parent, which would be a grandparent. Then you get another parent, which is a great grandparent. And you can see, for example, that this is in like the third kind of look ahead frame. So this is why it's good to always use that container kind of tag. And you can see that blue area on screen. That's obviously the frame itself. So that's kind of the full frame size. But what we want to do is we want to copy this parent element with a child in. So that's what we're going to do, because we want to copy the outer zone, basically. So that's where we're going to be starting from. So how do we copy a parent? Well, I've just put it into here, but it's to find the parent, you use the parent function or method, and then you use the clone one. So that's good. Now we want to add it in so that it comes after our current zone. So that's kind of really easy because we just use the append to function. But append to will just take an element, for example, and will take whatever you're dealing with, and it'll put it onto the end of whatever it is that you want. Now, we don't want to put it onto the end of like the previous zone, because then you get like zones inside zones and stuff like that, and that wouldn't work. What we want to do is put it into the whole, frame, that blue frame that I was looking at. So that's actually the grandparent here. So an easy way to do that is just to call parent twice. And what we're going to do is clone that first zone. Then we need to actually find it. So find new zone. Let's call this first one clone 1. You could call it position 1, position 2, or whatever. Whatever makes sense for you. We're going to try and find it by using a function called children and last. And the reason we're going to do that is because we've cloned the zone's not going to have any unique attributes. So it's not going to have anything for us to find, like image zone 2 or whatever. So we can't find it because it's just a straight rip-off, right? So if I go to this page here, you see we've just cloned the zone and one is moved up and one hasn't. If we look in the, because now they're on top of each other. If we look here, we've got our two zones, but they're both the same picture. They've both got image zone 1, and they're both referred to as image zone 1 in this data attribute. So like this would be, if you're recording data from this would be bad. So I'm just gonna change that just so that we can add a new class to it, basically. So classes in CSS. So when Gorilla's creating zones, sorry, I'm going to readjust my chair a little bit. So when Gorilla's creating zones, rather than giving them ID or name attributes, what they do is they give them classes. So the names of your zones end up being a CSS class. So you can use that obviously not just to find your zone, but you can use it to then have kind of effects or whatever that can be grouped together for anything that falls under that class, and each of those classes should in theory be unique. But we don't want image zone 1, we want to give it a new name like image zone 2 on something on the clone. So if I do clone remove class, so in this case we're going to remove image zone 1, and then I'll add a new class. So we're going to add image zone 2 to the clone. So that's going to take off the previous zone class, and it's going to add on the new one. Now what we also want to do is we want to change that data attribute really, because it should be the new one. So you can use the attribute. If anyone's seriously bored or not understanding, just let me know. I'm happy to take questions as well while I'm doing this. But so you can refer to attributes again using jQuery. We can refer to like an attribute like the data tag attribute. And the reason we might want to change this is, when people are using this, like if they were using this for a zone where they were going to try and record data for making sure that Gorilla functions like it should, you really should change the classes and the zones if you're gonna clone stuff, basically. Now the other thing we want to do is we want to change the picture. So we don't want the same picture. We would like a different picture. So again, we can use this attribute function and we can refer to the source and we can pick a different picture. Now, at the moment, we don't have any other pictures loaded in to the spreadsheet, so we'd have to call them as variables in our script and do that. But of course, that would be tedious if you had like 600 pictures, for example. It might be easier to do it from a spreadsheet rather than having to make 600 variables, basically. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to download the spreadsheet. I was going to make a couple of changes to it. So we're going to add a few more pictures in, basically. Just waiting for Excel to pop open. So what I want to do is because the example that was given on the Facebook forums had a few more pictures. So we're going to add in, picture 3, picture 4, picture 5, and picture 6. Let's do that. And I have 5 pictures loaded up, so I can just do something like this. And then this will obviously be accessible for us in our scripting. because we can just refer to the row that we're currently on, and then we can call whatever picture is in the column that we want. All right, so now we've got that. Let's go back to Gorilla. Let's upload our spreadsheet. And there we go. So we've got all this loaded up. So what do we want to do now? Well, we want to call it in our script. So for our first clone, I would like to call row.picture2. So this won't actually load up your picture. Now, why is it not going to be able to load up your picture? The reason it's not going to load up your picture is because this will just literally call the string variable rather than the URL where the picture is stored. So if I wanted to call a particular picture, for example, this column picture that we're looking for, I might do something like gorilla.stimuli URL, and this is a function that's built into the API, and then I'd call row.picture to there. So what that does is basically we'll do gorilla.stimuli, but it'll do something like this, and then gorilla stimuli URL, will return a URL for you for where this picture can be accessed from in Gorilla and load it up. Now you need that if you want to load a new picture up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on preview task. I'm going to check to see that we get two different pictures. Right, we've had as entering that into the seat. I told you I was not paying attention. I was entering that into the wrong wrong bit of the script. No. Got to enter that on the first screen when I was typing, because obviously when I refreshed the page and it moved back up and I scrolled, it doesn't matter. So there we have our two pictures. So we've got picture 1 and picture 2. And if we look in the HTML now, we have image zone 2, image zone 2, and we have image zone 1, image zone 1. So that's great. And if I reload this now, you can see the first one is kind of moving off, basically. So what we want to do is, now that we have the first clone as well, is we want to move that clone. Let's say that first clone is going to be position 4. So I'm just going to do a quick calculation. So at the top of our code here, so we've got the first position. Let's calculate the fourth position. So the fourth position is basically just the same as the first one, but without the negative. So it should be 2.1 visual degrees, pixels per degrees to string. And then that'll get us our value. So that's really good, because now we can do this top one and this bottom one, basically. What we want to do is, once this is moved, we want to also then move the clone. So we're going to do clone CSS. We're going to refer to its top value, top property, and do the fourth position, and then add in pixels, just like before. So now if we click on this, so now you can see that we have this one. So the second one has moved positively, but this first one hasn't moved anywhere. That's because the loading time has slightly increased beyond 1 frame now, and it hasn't kind of moved. It didn't have time to fire it before this kind of was loaded in. So this was loaded in a little bit later. So this is, I'm just showing you kind of like how timing can affect things. So if we now move this to, say, it's going to do a much bigger number, like 100 milliseconds. Do that. That still hasn't moved. Let me do a much bigger number now. Let's just do a whole second for it to wait to move. Just want to show you. So there you go. This is still retaining its kind of main CSS value, and we'll go into why it's doing that in a second. But the second picture does seem to move, so that's all right. So the first clone has kind of already worked. So let's now going to go to this kind of setting here. Now you can do when you're trying to affect CSS, for example, you can add things like an important tag to try and override CSS. Now I'm going to show you why this is not kind of always the best case, and what happens when you try and run that. If I do this, you'll see that it hasn't actually overwritten that kind of top value there. So this might not always be the most useful kind of way to do it. So what you could actually do is make the first clone. So if you wanted for things to be really easy and to not bother with timing, which is kind of the path I'm heading towards, you can just make the first clone. You can hide this one and make the first clone the one that goes up there, and then the second one the one that goes there. So what we can do is the first clone could actually take that first position. I'm just going to set this back to like 1 frame on a 60 hertz monitor. So this first one, for example, could just take the main kind of main one, and then we could start the first clone to be like the first position, second clone to be second position, and all so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide, and I could do that by using display and none. I'm going to hide that first image, and yeah, so we've got one that's basically hidden, which is this one. So this second one, which is hidden, and then we've got one that's available for viewing, basically. And then what we can do is we can just make more clones. So if we're gonna do, let's make one that goes kind of to the top, one that goes. Let's do this after the clone here. Set display to none. We'll do this. And remember, main zone is looking for that image zone 1 kind of reference that we set up. So let's just say we're going to make it kind of disappear. So let's just check to make sure that the other one is not being displayed. Yep. So that one's not being displayed, because if I set this to display none, there's nothing behind it, basically. So that's good. Then what we can do is we can obviously just make more kind of clones. We can make we do the making of the clones before obviously setting this to none. So we're going to move this down a little bit. So if I was going to do this, I'd probably stick it a bit further along. Right. So let's say we're going to do another clone like this. So this is going to be clone 2. You could make these kind of iteratively, but it's also not a problem to make them like this. So if we remove the last child will be image zone 1, so we're going to make this into image zone 3. And now if we go look, we should have, so right, made a tiny error when cloning. Let's I need to do another actual clone. It'd help if I did the clone again. So now we should have basically 3 images on top of each other. So now we've got picture 1, which is set to display, picture 2, which is set to display, and picture 3, which is now set to not display, basically. So this one, so if I set this, let's set this one to none. Behind that is that other picture. So what we want to do is we want to move those along, basically. And when we're adding it, when you're using append or any kind of method like that, so let me just show you. So if I go to append to, for example, so append will add things to the end or insert into kind of the end of an element. So you have to be careful, obviously, where you're ending it and then what you're referencing and how you're kind of going about it. So we've got 2 clones, and we're going to want one of them to obviously go up and one of them to go down. So what we need to do is refer to these for separate positions. We're going to use our pixels value. Also, it's always good to make sure that we're getting the values that we want. So it's going to do a console log just to check that everything is coming through all right. So yeah, we've got our 2 values there, but you notice it obviously again hasn't set it to the actual CSS of the images. And that's again to do with the loading, which I'm going to fix in a second. But we've got our 2 values kind of coming through. We just then need to apply them to each of them, because if you, rather than calling the variables we created, if you actually call, hold on, I'm going to do clone1.css, and you can call the value to get a value. You don't just have to set a value. You can clone. You can like get the value as well. So if we did this, so we're going to do it after a whole second, for example. Let me get up the console. So we wait. And then it tells us where they should be. Now you notice that the 2 values coming through, one is positive. Actually, sorry, both of them are coming through as positive. I just need to check. Check where I've done the. Yes, I've done the. Yes. So this is it's the way I'm referring to the. It's the way I'm referring to in creating the clones. That's causing the issue there. So when we add the first clone, it's actually going to be the first parent, first child. Sorry. So I'll show you what's happened there. I'm figuring this out live, of course. So bear with me as we're doing this. I'm just commenting this out. So I'll show you what happens on the first clone, basically. So when we do the first clone, you see this zone has actually become the last child, basically, and then this has become the first child. So that's what we need to refer to. So we need to refer to the first child there. So we don't need the last one, we need the first one. That's still set to not display at the moment, but if I take this off, and let me just bring the other one on. That's the other child there, basically. So what I'm gonna do is remove this no display, so I'll sort that out in a different way in a second. I'm actually gonna make sure that we have enough images. Again, so that we have one for the top and one for the bottom. Yeah, it's just a lot of testing, basically. So yeah, you got to make sure that. I've uncommented there we go. I uncommented a comment accidentally there while I was doing that. So now we should have. So we've got image zone 3, image zone 1, and image zone 2, but this one has image zone 2 on it, so we need to remove that, basically, because we're now referencing a different order. So this is why it's always kind of good to check. So I'm referencing the first kind of child element, basically. So I know that for image zone 3, I need to remove that second class, basically. So let's just make sure we have our 3 image zones. Image zone 3, image zone 1, image zone 2. So that's great. So what we can do now, so we can try and move our clones around. So let's just do a ridiculous time just to show you. So we have 1, 2, 3 kind of seconds, and there you go. Let me reload. So we have that moved off by a certain number of degrees. Now, if I wanted to make that kind of more pronounced, just for the purposes of showing this, because those images are quite big. So the problem is my images are taking up like the max space, and then they're going to be overlapping. To stop that from happening, I can just make this bigger for now. Obviously, you have something that's completely ludicrous, and then you have a bit more distance between your images. Normally, you'd obviously use smaller images so that they wouldn't overlap. So it's something you got to think about, because the image zones have a maximum value. So I'll show you what that is. So let's just let this run so that it creates the gap there. So the maximum values that the image zones can have will define like how big you can go for your images. So for example, here, if I go on inspect here, so obviously we've got a much bigger distance for the top now. So the reason that they have a max width is this is put in by Gorilla, a max width and a max height. So if your images are bigger than this, basically, when you present them, they can run into that same issue that mine have, where they can be overlapping. So you need to be careful for the kind of size of the images that you're going to be using, because there is this max width and max height, and that max width and max height changes obviously as the screen changes. So Gorilla sets like the max width and max height differently based on the screen size. So if I now reload this at this level, if I scroll down and I go into here, the max height now is 121 pixels and 160 pixels. But if I make this smaller, I reload as well, you can see that that's a lot different. Now the reason this is an issue is because obviously if I mean people aren't going to be changing the size of their screens, or they shouldn't during an experiment, but obviously like if you set something to go, I don't know, like 100, so you know screen calibration is done on like a bigger screen, and then if they change their value or whatever, you could theoretically send a picture off screen. So one thing to think about might be that you might want to force the full screen, for example. That might be something to think about, just because you know if people are changing their values like this, people really shouldn't be changing their viewport size. But if they do, you can send an image off screen. So that's one thing to consider, as well as the size of your original images as well, because Gorilla will restrain their size with the max width and max height stuff. You can actually change that. So this max width and max height, if I take this off, we'll actually put the image to its regular size. So let me just reload. Let's let it load up. If I now take this off, if I take off max width and max height, it'll put these images to its full height basically. So you can play around with it. You can make max width and max height bigger or smaller, but do remember, if you affect max width and max height and you take over from Gorilla's calculation, you've got to take into account things like screen size and screen resolution. So you just got to think about like what size images are you going to be using to make sure that they don't end up overlapping. Or you could use a bigger visual degree to make things go further away from each other. So you could use like, I don't know, 5 or something or whatever, but you could put things further away from each other. So that's another option basically. Now to do like the images. So if I did the images on the side with these images, so if I'm going to do this, these images need to be a lot smaller. So I'm going to need to either constrain. I might what I might have to do is get the max width and max height, then half it to make it a bit better for mine, because my images are quite large. So these, if I put these on the side here, they are gonna overlap, and that's gonna be problematic. This one should be, it's doing its calculation correctly. This one should be kind of up here, so I'll have a little bit more space to play with the images. This one is not taking the attribute properly, so I'm going to fix that in a second, relative to that kind of central point there, basically. And then I still have to obviously refresh the layout and everything once that's done. But just something to keep in mind. So you know, if your images are going to be bigger than this, for example, just be wary of potential kind of overlap as well. This is the second. See, this is where we're not actually shifting the zone has messed things up a little bit. Because yeah, relying on the picture shift has caused a little bit of this issue here. Basically, so I'm gonna shift these, I think, rather than on the images, shift the actual zones themselves. So rather than referring to the CSS for these, let's refer to the parent CSS. So we moved those. So let's just try that. So yeah, we're trying this. We're working on this live, this idea. So let's give it a couple of seconds for it to split. So yeah, that's moved now. So that's good. But the position is still absolute, so it's still basically stretching the box now. So that's something I'm gonna fix in a second. Just checking the images as well. So the images are still the same. So the top hasn't this top attribute when it's obviously being generated. Yeah, the top attribute hasn't moved properly. So slightly annoying with the CSS, but don't worry, we're gonna change that then. Let's just see. Just gonna see what the first clone's kind of parent is set to. Just gonna have a drink. So we'll give it a second. Hold on. We'll reload it. So it's set to 233 pixels. All right. So let's see. So let me just do the first one. So now I'm just going to set the first one after 3 seconds to move, hopefully. So yeah, that's moved very far ahead. So let's just check why. Yeah, it's just stretched the zone. It's because it's not recalculating the inset, so potentially moving the picture is a better idea than rather than moving the other one, because otherwise we have to recalculate the inset. So we go back to the we'll just give it a couple of seconds. There we go. So that one has, we reload. So yeah, that one has moved. All right. Then we just need the other image to obviously move the other way. So we want image zone 2. So that one should. How much is the other one? 67. So I'm just trying. I just want to see how much space it's going to generate. So okay, so it's going to generate about that much by. Let me just remove the one in the middle. So yeah, this height, it's going to generate not a huge amount of difference. I mean, this already has a top to it, so we should add that on. So it should be, because it's already 7 pixels, so we can call that in as an extra basically. But let's say that's 74 pixels then. So yeah, that's not going to be enough to stop overlap on the side here. So what I'm going to need to do is either make the pictures a little bit smaller, or just pretend like I have a huge screen with the with the screen calibration, which isn't obviously what it'd be like in real life. So, Because if I do something silly like that, obviously the movement will be more pronounced. But I might need to restrict the max width of these images because they're quite. That's what's throwing everything off as well, is that these are quite large. So let me just call them. So let's. All right, let me reload. So what I might want to do is let's call the max width basically. So if I do, let's do. What I want to do is we want to find out the max width and the max height. So max width like that. I think. CSS max width. Yeah, it's the max width property like that. So I just want to find out what see if we can actually get the max width property, and then to see if we can obviously reset it by just probably doing like half of what it should be. So yeah. So we got the max width. Cool. So let's do, I don't know. Let's just half it. Let's just make life easier. Let's just make the images a lot smaller. Let's go. So clone one max width is equal to clone one dot css. Then clone one max width. Let's just do half of that. So we'll do the same for height. Do it that way. Now in this case, might have been easier to. So I might try after this as well, just setting up the ones from the middle and doing the calculations from there, because this is now become a bit more complicated than I was hoping to. But let's see if this works. So then we set the max width and max height to max width. We'll need a string value there. Then we'll need pixels. And we'll set the. You don't have to set CSS kind of on each individual line. You could like pass multiple arguments if you wanted to, but let's just try setting the max height. Doing the same thing. This string. Let's give this a go. See if it works. That should make that first one basically half the size. Let's just check. Oh, made a typo. That's why the console's really useful. Got to actually get the max height value. Yeah, it might have been easier to set the zones up and to calculate them from the center. But you know, you live and you learn. So let's just see if it's. It's gonna be a timing issue again. All right, let me set this into our timeout just to show you. thought creating a clone might be simpler, but potentially not. Let's reload. Yeah, that should work. It's not setting the picture size kind of correctly. I'll have to just use smaller pictures. I was just worried about the overlap for the rest of the display, basically, because the pictures are quite large, but it's not setting the max width, the max height properly, and that's an timing error of my part there, basically. So we get the max width and max heights. Let me just make sure I'm doing my calculations correctly. Should be, but you never know. Could be screwing something up with the with the CSS, basically. So let me just, yeah, see, it's going back as nan. That's probably because I'm getting it to refer to itself. So I might have been doing a I don't think it's dividing by 2. I think it's because I'm getting it to refer to itself. So having a small issue there. Yeah, that's it. Yep. It's fine. So yeah, debugging and kind of getting things wrong, being a little bit messy. It's all part of the process, basically. You just gotta work it out. So what's happening here is when I'm attempting to do this, it's not actually doing what I want it to do, because it's not actually dividing by it. So I'll show you. So it's not actually dividing by 2. And the reason it's not dividing by 2 is because it's returning I haven't initialized it either as well. So I haven't set it up, thought it what I want to do. So I'll show you, because it's going to give us nan, basically. So it's going to give us like a null value, or a not kind of applicable value, because of the division it's trying to do. So see, it's returning nan for us. The reason for that is when it's returning this width and height, returning kind of an integer for us. So when we do this kind of division here, so I'll just show you. So this is where types, for example, come into play. So this is somewhere where I kind of made a mistake, because if you do clone, so if I do this to try and find out what's being returned, it's going to be like it's a string that's being returned, and then I'm trying to do a division on a string, which is just never going to happen. So that's my error there. So what's it's kind of fooled me for a few minutes is the fact that I was trying to do a division on a string because I was returning a string value. So what I need to do is actually convert it back to a number so that I can use it. So just like we have number to string, we have string to number as well. So just to show you, so we've got pass int or pass float, and you also got number as well. So pass int will return an integer for us, which is good. Pass float will convert it to a point number, so a number with decimal points. So considering that we're probably going to get some decimal points, we probably need to use pass int. So I'll show you what pass int looks like. Pass float, sorry. Pass float. So pass float converts a string to a point number, which is a floating point number, so it has decimal places in it, basically. So now if I'm going to do, let's do pass float, and we're going to do, we're just going to call our variable that we're calling there. And then we're going to do the same here. Yeah, maybe the clones weren't the greatest idea, but thought it might be a bit easier. Yeah, so it's got one of them. I've just made a spelling mistake on the other one. Okay. So now we can actually get these kind of two numbers back. So now we get them as numbers. So now we can set them. Yeah, we should be able to set them now because we get a number back. So if I do console log, so type of is a great way to check what you're getting. So if I just check what it is that we're getting back, we will be getting yeah, we get a number, and then it works. See, that's trying to do a division on a string. So stuff like that can happen, especially when you're trying to do things live and you're trying to explain things. Right. So now that we've got that, and we've made the images a bit smaller as well. We could even do it to save us having to do this a lot of times. We could do it before we clone the other one. So I'm just going to make my other images smaller just to make the layout a bit easier. So I'm just going to do this, but do it to the kind of main one first. So that way, when we clone the images, they're already going to be smaller. So that'll save us having to do it like loads of times, basically. So mean zone. You can also restrict so the other thing we can do, so this allows you to set like a particular ratio that you might want. The other thing you can do is just literally make the images smaller in the task structure as well. So you can kind of restrict the size here to make it even smaller to make them all fit. So we'll just, yeah, I don't know if anyone's going to need this. So I'm just going to comment this out for now, but you could basically do that on the main ones. I was going to leave this in here. I might include this when I put this up later. Might not, but we'll see. Let's just make them a bit smaller. Then it should. Yeah, those will work. Those will work fine. All right. Just gonna ignore that now. And then we've got the first one shifting. All right, let's get the other ones into place now then. You know what? We're going to do, instead of using the clone references, because the clone references are going to be outdated, we'll use jQuery references. So we'll pull image zone 2. We'll do the same thing here. Image zone 3. And then I just have to make the middle picture disappear as well. Yeah. So I'm just going to make the middle picture disappear, so that's fine. So let's do. So I don't want the middle one to be there anymore. And I'll sort the timing out in a second. I'm just using like an extreme timing just to show everyone why timings can be a potential issue. I could just display none. So let's just go to a second, so we don't have to wait for 3 seconds each time. Yep. So we've got that. So we've got our setup there. I might actually use this ratio instead. Yeah, let's try this because I might want to make my images a little bit smaller. Oh, I seem to be losing my mouse. There we go. Yeah, my mouse is it's a dark core kind of wireless one. It decided that it was just going to have some interference there, basically, and then not not work essentially. So yeah, that's not great. All right, let me just so we can then set. So it's a slightly long. I'm going to clean this up because it's slightly longer than I wanted it to be. But I was kind of showing things live and yeah. So max height. Then this way we can use like a ratio, for example. That might be nicer because then you can like ratio the pictures to whatever you want them to be so that they don't overlap depending on the sizes. So that actually might be quite useful for some people, depending on the way they approach it. All right. So that'll set that up. So now you've got much smaller images, and then we can do the demo a little bit easier. So now I'm just going to do the ones on the side. So this took about half an hour more than I wanted it to, but when it happens, you know, sometimes you do messy things like that, like try and divide a string and it doesn't work out. So now we're going to put images to the side here as well. So what we want to do now is make just going to replace these balls here for the clones with sorry, in the clones, I'm just going to replace them with the jQuery actual selector as well. Just to make it a bit nicer. Yeah, so that's I've done No, I'll clean this up later because otherwise we're just going to be here for forever, basically. So let's do that in a bit anyway. So what we want to do is now we want to get the other clones out as well. So let's add the ones to the right hand side. So yeah, I'm definitely going to clean this up and refactor this because this is a lot of code to do something fairly straightforward. So I'm going to sort this out in a little bit. And then those are the other pictures. We'll remove image zone 3, add image zone 4, then remove 4, add 5. Yeah, that's right, add 5. This way we know we can refer to them by the correct image zones. So it's added the new pictures in there. That's good. Right, cool. So now what we want to do is set them off to the side. But what I might do, because that's basically just how to do the clones and how to sort kind of everything out. What I might do is just clean this up off stream afterwards and just put it on my open materials. But basically, that's what I'd do. Just create the zones, check for kind of any kind of overlaps. Basically, obviously, the smaller the screens are, the higher the chance of overlaps. So something to think about. I'm going to clean this up before I publish it, but I do want to do another request. I'm just going to save where I am on this. So. So I'm just gonna, I will clean this up off stream because otherwise it's literally just like I'm gonna spend the entire 2 hours just sorting this out. So I'm gonna clean this up. But that's how I do it basically. So I'd create clones, and then I'd move them around. So for the others, I'd basically shift them using the right or left property on CSS as well as the top and bottom for the other ones. And obviously they have to be done at not you're going to have to do like a 45-degree angle calculation from the center point. You're going to have to do like half the visual angle calculation basically when you're doing the right hand side for the top bit, half the same for the bottom bit. So yeah, I'll clean that up in a little bit, but that one's done. I'll sort that out so it gets the other 4 into position as well. Now I'm gonna, just so we have a chance to look at something else as well. Let's look at let's quickly knock out the questionnaire ones. So just to go on to something completely different. So let's look at some questionnaire CSS basically. Align radio button text. So just to do something completely different. So radio buttons. So the question for this one was question items right to left for Hebrew speakers, for example, radio buttons. So when you do like a normal radio button, test button, and you do 1, 2, 3, that kind of stuff. Let's use sample A, sample B, sample C. So obviously, if you want to do this right to left, there's a couple of ways to do this, to shift this onto the other side, and you can actually test stuff. So the questionnaire builder, so the reason I wanted to do something different as well, just to show the questionnaire builder, is you can test stuff live here. Now, the thing about the questionnaire builder is, this is why I wanted to just quickly show this on stream. So the script function here doesn't actually execute like when the page loads, it executes when the page is finished and it's sent in. So the script function actually won't help you here. So it's better to use the rich text or the text entry one. And it's better to write scripts inside script tags. And if you make an error, it's really simple, because if you make an error like this, your work will disappear. So I usually have the console running at the same time, because this will tell me, if I'm doing anything wrong. Like if I do this, for example, you see we get a bunch of red coming up here, so like unexpected token and stuff like that. So it's good to have your console running while you're doing this. Now, shifting stuff left to right. So shifting the question text itself can be done basically using Markdown, but obviously putting these buttons onto the other side, when you're shifting things like right to left, you got to think about the button itself as well as the text. So when you're looking at this, there's a grouping basically. So there's a grouping that has the button, and then you've got the actual text itself. So when you're looking at something like that, you can actually use the CSS kind of direction property for the text itself. So if, for example, I was going to refer to this kind of radio button, and there's a few ways I could do it. So I could refer to the input type, for example, so we could do just all of them, which will be easier, or you could refer to like the key. So when you make something in the questionnaire builder and you put this key in, that's actually used for the name attribute. So you could use that to refer to whatever it is that you're trying to kind of refer to. But I normally like to refer to all the radio buttons or something like that, so that you can refer to the whole kind of class basically. So when you're referring to it, I recommend, so unless you've got a particular reason just to pick like one of these out, if you want to affect all of them, I think it's better to do it all at once, and I'll show you why. I was going to show you really quickly. So I have, one of the examples that I have is the data checker, which basically checks to see if people have entered responses into things. And if they haven't, it gives like a screen alert. So if people haven't answered, it will give a screen alert on the questionnaire. Highlight missing answers, that's what I'm looking for, yeah. So highlight missing answers. So I'm just showing you this. So what this does is, just to show you really quickly, if you don't put stuff into here, when you go on to the next one, it brings an alert up and it highlights the ones that they haven't done. And this is done by looking for like each individual type of the buttons. So if I just open this up, so you can see I look for example, on the form control, so like any kind of inputs basically. I'm going to explain this in a second, but I look for anything that has a value of undefined, and then I look for anything that has an attribute type of radio, for example. So this is very similar to what we're going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this code. Some of you might have seen me use this yesterday, but I was using a bit of Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code is just like an IDE or an editor where it's easier to see. All right, don't need that. Where it's easier to see the kind of code that you're doing rather than doing it in here, because this is quite tricky to see. So let me just copy this over because I want to show you how this works basically. So let me just save this. I'm not using my hotkeys. I'll just save this as the questionnaire 1 class sample, and it's going to be saved as JavaScript file. There we go. So you can see, well, it's technically a HTML file because we've got script tags, but whatever. So you can see that in here, if I close this off, so you can see that for the form controls, the first thing that I'm doing is I'm looking for anything with a value that's undefined, and then I'm looking at each of the inputs and everything. And this is the bit that I'm really kind of interested in, because this is the function that I want basically for this radio one. I don't want all the other ones for now, so I'm just gonna open up a new file, paste this in. So I don't really need anything other than the radio one, so I'm just gonna delete these because these are checkboxes and all that kind of stuff, basically. So anything that comes with this can go. Anything that comes with this as well can go. So yeah, we just need these radio functions, basically. So anything that's got the attribute type for radio, what I want to do, I'm going to remove this, is I want to make the CSS go right to left, basically. So how do we do that? Well, if I go back to what we're doing here, if I go onto here and I go onto element style, you can use something known as direction. So you have direction and you have RTL, and there you go. And that's what we're gonna. That's essentially what we're gonna do. Is we're gonna refer to this. We're gonna refer to each of these button groupings, and then we're gonna refer to. Well, actually, we could just refer to the parent element. To be honest, we could just make the whole parent element right to left as well, to make everyone's lives a bit simpler. So let me just take this off, so it's back. So what we want to do is, if the attribute type is radio, what we want to do is we want to call this, and we want to call their parent. So just so we're doing something a little bit different. So we want to call the parent, and then we're going to call the CSS. And then in the CSS, we're going to do direction, and then we're going to do right to left. That's all we're going to need for this. So just going to copy this. And I like using something like Visual Studio Code because it highlights your code for you, so it makes everything a bit easier. And there you go. That's that. That's request sorted out. No, this is JavaScript. So Gorilla works on JavaScript and TypeScript. So yeah, there's a question in chat about this. So no, this is JavaScript. And actually, this particular type of reference of using parent and using .css functions is actually jQuery. So yeah, this is just plain old JavaScript. So what I'm doing here in the JavaScript is I'm looking for anything in jQuery that's got a value of input, so anything that requires an input. So in this case, I'm looking for these radio buttons. Then I'm basically going through all the inputs by using this each function. So it's going to go through every input on the page. And then I'm using that to find the parent, so to find like the buttons themselves and the whole kind of group together. And then I'm just setting the direction right to left. So that's a really simple one. So I can add this to my open materials. So that's a request for the questionnaire done. So right to left setup. I might, when I do this, put some more comments in so people can kind of use it. But I'll do that again, kind of off stream. So this one can be marked as done. Yeah. C's a good one to. So if you've learnt C, it's JavaScript is not going to be too hard. JavaScript is a lot easier than C because it's kind of like a few levels of abstraction higher, basically, as a scripting language. So that was aligning questionnaire text. Let's just pick a different one now. So let's do personality feedback. Someone wants to do feedback on personality scores in a questionnaire. Is there any way for participant scores to be presented on the screen after they complete the questionnaire? Yeah, C is better. Yes, yeah. Yeah, JavaScript is just very easy to make things with. All right. So seems like I'm getting my first. I need to set up a ban bot as well because I'm getting some spam. So I'm gonna do that for next week as well, so I can remove the spam basically. Yep. So that's gonna be I'm gonna have to set up a moderation bot because then like otherwise it takes time away for me to remove stuff. So yeah, that's frustrating. I won't go into my stream manager now because I was only going to be streaming for another 10 minutes. But yeah, I'll set up a moderation bot for next week. Damn. All right. Didn't realize that someone with like a few viewers would still get spammed as well. So personality feedback. So in Gorilla, this is it's going to be a little bit of a cheat because I've already done something like this. Yeah, I don't know if people really fall for that because like yeah, why would you want to buy followers to watch you because like it's all just bots basically, so it's not gonna help at all. Um, so Gorilla has a sample. So this particular person asked for feedback questionnaires. So just because to round up my stream, yeah, you'll definitely if you buy followers, you definitely get banned. Yeah, it's not worth it at all. It's not worth it at all. So Gorilla already have the big five personality questionnaire already set up. So there's a 10-item questionnaire anyway. So if I'm gonna preview this quickly, so there's already a personality questionnaire, and it does already record stuff at the end. So when you fill this out, it already records measures for you for your personality. So this particular person just wants to see how to show them. Now, if we look down a bit further, if we go to the bottom, I could just collapse everything, but I'm just going to scroll down because it's not that long. At the end, they have this script where they're like already calculating all of the kind of extroversion, agreeableness, all these different kind of psychological concepts for you. I don't really have time because I'm only going to be streaming for a little bit longer. But they're already calculating this for you. So all you need to do is just show this on the next page to the participant. It's actually not that hard once you've got this set up. So I'm just going to go to an older example to show you why it's not that hard to show this. So if I go back to my projects, and I'm going to go back to my open one. So with the personality one, let me just search for personality. Yeah, there we go. Show personality on the next page. So on this one, what I do is I show the highest one that you have on the next page. So on my one, and I'm just going to adapt this for the request that this person's asking for, but whatever you score the highest on, I show that your highest scoring trait there. So I already have an example that's kind of similar to this, and it's just showing the highest scoring trait, but there's no reason why we couldn't show all of them. And it's actually not that hard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone this, and I'm going to put it into my open material so I can do this as well. Show personality scores on the next page. And rather than just showing the highest one, I'm going to show all of them basically. So let me just go into the edit mode. Yeah, it's not just if statements. Yeah, it's you also have to use embedded data in Gorilla to retrieve it. Yeah, it's absolutely fine. I don't know how late into the stream you joined, so I don't know how much sense it makes. Yeah, I'm just doing so. Gorilla's obviously a way to kind of do personality questionnaires as well as experimental protocols. So I'm just going to be showing people the scores on the personality tests. Ah, okay, right, yeah. Fair enough. So this is an experimental platform and it allows people to do like personality tests and research, and obviously psychologists use it. And I'm just kind of giving scripting sessions in it just to show like what people can do with it who use it regularly. So it's very targeted towards people who use the platformer a lot, basically. So in the Gorilla kind of tab here, so after all of this calculation is done, all of these statements are saved, which basically save all of your variables for all of your scores based on the 5 personality model for everything. So yeah, everything's being put into variables here for you, and it's being stored in Gorilla's embedded data, so that you can recall that at any point. So for those that use Gorilla, like you can call that up during any like the participants' kind of life cycle before they finish the whole experiment. So what we want to do is just basically call up these scores on the next page to show them their scores. And you see here that it's saved into the metric. So this is a function of the Gorilla's API where you save it into the metric, and it saves the score and it saves the response and everything else like that. Oh yeah, it's just reading chat. Yeah, I think it'd be hard. It'd be hard to get banned. I think it'd be hard to get banned. I don't know of anyone that's been banned from the kind of Gorilla community or the research community there. Yeah. There might be, but I'm not sure. So I've got this function here that finds the maximum, but rather than find the maximum, we just want to basically recall all of these. So we just want to call them up. And they're being stored obviously by these keys, so the openness rating, the openness scores as well. So that's all we want to bring up on the next page, basically. So on the second page, what we want to show is we want to show the scores by retrieving them. So using the Gorilla kind of API, we can do the agreeableness rating, for example. So we can do a Gorilla retrieve there. And I'll fill that out in a second. We'll do the openness. So, if you depends if you believe in the 5-factor model in psychology for for personality. Not everyone does, but we're just using this as an example. So the other measures are emotional stability and conscientiousness, which is always hard to emotional ability rating, conscientiousness. And then the last one is, so let me just check what the last one is. Agreeableness, extroversion, conscientiousness, emotional stability, openness. So extroversion is the other one that I'm missing. So extroversion rating. All right, and then what we want to do is we just want to recall these ratings or these scores. So you can just recall them by using the key, basically. So you can either recall the rating if you want to recall the rating, or you can recall the score. The person who asked for this request didn't really make it, didn't really say what they wanted to recall. So I'm just gonna set these ones up. So this basically is all we're doing is using the Gorilla retrieve statement right now from the Gorilla API, and we're just going to be calling, we're going to be retrieving directly from that embedded data that was being saved earlier. So I'm just going to rename my variables in a second. So just setting the retrieve statement up. So we want to get the agreeableness rating. And you can see what's saved up here. So we've got the emotional stability rating. Sorry, it's this one that we need. It's the key value that we need. Yeah, the text adding in scores is never. It's never going to be too easy. It looks a bit messy when you're doing it like this, basically. But don't worry. And then we're going to retrieve the extroversion rating. And then we've got all our ratings. Then we just need to display them, which is going to be really easy, because all we need to do is just have, we'll have, just make 5 empty classes. So we'll extroversion rating, your oh yeah. So we got 1. Let's just do this 5 times. let's do agreeable next. Let's do openness after that. Openness is with 2, right? That's, yeah, with two ends. I always get a bit confused. And then conscientiousness. Conscientiousness. Yep. Yep, I always miss the SC there. Spelling is important to make sure you get your variables out. Openness, conscientiousness, and then emotional ability rating. Did I do it with an uppercase? No, I did it with lowercase. And then we just need to add a couple of classes in. So we're going to have and these are just to display our scores basically. So I'm just adding some divs to basically hold our scores in. Right. Yep. So extroversion rating, agreeableness, openness, conscientiousness, emotional stability. That's going to go on that page. Okay, let's do a quick preview. Just make sure everything works and we're all happy. So we now launch. Let's do some ratings. There we go, there's our personality measure. And there's the ratings basically, all the scores. Yeah, so that's how that's done. So that's a kind of three knocked off that's ready to go. I'm going to work through more of these in the coming week as well, so everyone else can have theirs sorted out. But yeah, hopefully pick things up on the stream, and I'll see everyone next time. Basically, thank you for tuning in. Bye.